Hi there, my name is Annie and I want to welcome you to this video today on personal effectiveness and time management. Essentially, it's all about getting things done. So in this video, we're going to think about our personalities and how that impacts our preferences when it comes to time management and the different ways that we like to manage and prioritise our time. We're also, throughout the session, going to look at a couple of different models and some tips and tricks for managing our time. And the main one we're going to cover is Eisenhower's Urgent Important Matrix, which is a really important and useful tool that we can use when it comes to planning our time and focusing in on our goals and our future plans. As I said, we're going to mention a few different time management methods, ideas, tips and tricks that you can use to really focus your time and become more efficient and more effective with the time that you have to spend on different areas of your life and the projects that you're working on. So, personal effectiveness and time management is all about getting things done and achieving our goals. But often we go about these things in a wasteful, time-consuming or sloppy way. So this video is all about making the best use of our time and all the other resources that we have at our disposal so that we can achieve our goals efficiently, getting the most out of the time and the energy that we have to give. But not everybody does this in the same way. People are personally effective in different ways because everybody has different goals, values and priorities, and of course personalities. So we're going to be having a look at the Myers-Briggs type indicators, or MBTI, which you might have come across before. It's a profiling tool used to help individuals or sometimes teams understand their thinking and working preferences. And this can help us to allocate tasks appropriately, where one member of the team might derive more enjoyment than another, but also help us understand how we can best manage our own time. Like any profiling tool, it naturally has criticisms, and many people don't like being reduced to 4 letters, but it can be helpful in developing your self-awareness around what situations you might thrive in and what you might find stressful. Take planning a holiday, for example. Some people might have a spreadsheet of potential accommodation ranked by stars, proximity to the town centre, facilities, parking, different destinations, and other people might get on a train, get on a flight, turn up in their chosen destination and see where looks nice on arrival. So that's just 2 types of personality, 2 letters within the Myers-Briggs indicators. So we're just going to be focusing today on these 2 letters, the P and the J, the perceivers and judges. So perceivers tend to be a bit more like that second holiday planner. They prefer to be able to be flexible and spontaneous, keep their options open, and have the option to change plans and flex at the last minute. Whereas judges tend to prefer to be organised and planned. They don't like it when plans have to change. They're much more comfortable following instructions or rules or the plans that they've set out for themselves. So there isn't a right or wrong place to sit here on this spectrum. And I think there's benefits and downsides to each one. But an easy way, aside from the holiday example, to think about this sort of continuum or spectrum and where you sit on it is to think about how you might set your alarm clock in the morning. So judges place a high value on being on time. They set alarms and reminders and check the clock when a deadline is coming up. They are spectacularly good at estimating how long something will take and will never leave themselves just 10 minutes to complete a 30-minute task or commute, no matter how optimistic they are. In fact, they're much more likely to leave sort of an extra 20 minutes just in case. And some of these people might even do a dry run of an important journey, like going to an interview, just to make sure that they'll show up on time. Perceivers, on the other hand, take a much more flexible approach, and often they can be pathologically late for this reason. Unlike judges who don't really like the kind of approximate or unexpected, perceivers are constantly taking in the information around them, processing it and responding to it in real time. They might be on time if that's important to them or nothing else interesting is happening, but it's more likely they'll lose themselves to something else, something more exciting, an interesting item of news or a conversation that with someone they bump into that takes them down a different route, a different opportunity. So it's worth taking a moment to think about which of these groups you fall into. Are you a P or are you a J? And depending on where you sit, thinking about what your strengths are in relation to that area and what your weaknesses might be. How might you be able to mitigate some of those areas, particularly if you're working with somebody who sits at the other end of the spectrum? So now we're going to have a look at task management. And I want to share with you this quote from Eisenhower, who says, "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." But I want to ask you, what do you think the difference is between urgent and important? We often fall into the trap of thinking that they are the same thing, but in my opinion, urgent, a definition might be something that requires immediate attention. It puts us in reactive mode, one that's sort of marked by defensive, negative, hurried, kind of narrowly focused mindset. Whereas what's important contributes to our long-term mission, values or goals. And sometimes these important tasks can be urgent, but typically they're not. When we focus on these important activities as opposed to the urgent ones, we operate in responsive mode, which helps us to remain calm, rational and open to new opportunities. So as I said, we often fall into that trap of thinking that what's urgent is also important. And the consequence of that can mean that we struggle to kind of see the wood from the trees, see what really is our priority. And we can suffer from burnout, having so many different options and tasks to focus on and feel unable to move forward. So Eisenhower created a matrix, the urgent important matrix, in order to explain this and to help us manage the different tasks that we have to use within our time. So it's split into 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is the important and urgent quadrant. So these are the tasks that require our immediate attention and help us to meet our long-term goals or missions. So this might be a kind of an emergency, a deadline or a crisis, like applying for a job deadline, perhaps a tax deadline, or even your car breaking down or your partner going into A&E. So they're the things that we really need to deal with here and now, because they're going to have a big impact on our future plans, if not. So the thing about these tasks in this quadrant is, with a bit more planning, many of these tasks can be made more efficient or eliminated. We can move them into the second quadrant. For example, rather than leaving your job application to the night before, if you can do it in advance, it will stop being so urgent, and it will still be important, but it won't have that urgency element. Similarly, if you service your car regularly, perhaps it won't break down at a crucial moment when you're trying to get to a job interview, for example. So we can't eliminate these completely, but we can reduce them if we spend more time in quadrant 2. So quadrant 2 is not urgent, but important. These are the tasks that don't have a pressing deadline, but will help us to achieve our goals and future plans. So they might be about strengthening relationships, networking with people we might want to work with or learn from, personal development, attending training sessions and workshops, reading things related to your field, and developing yourself. So we should spend most of our time in this area if possible, but we often don't, as we aren't aware of what is most important to us, and we can have a sort of present bias or an urgency addiction, causing us to focus on what is most pressing at that moment. And that can mean it's hard to get motivated when there isn't a pressing deadline. So we put it off saying, I will do that, next week, next month, and it gets moved on and on. Departing from this and focusing in on this area will take power and self-discipline, but it's really important if we want to move towards achieving our goals and making the best use of our time. So we've seen that we want to manage those activities in quadrant 1. We want to focus on the activities in quadrant 2, but what about quadrants 3 and 4? So in quadrant 3, we have the activities that are urgent, but are not important. These are activities that require our attention now, but they don't help us to achieve our own goals. They can often be interruptions from other people, perhaps helping them to fulfill their goals and meet their priorities. So it might be a phone call or responding to emails, a favour or delegated work you've been asked to do by somebody else. So lots of us spend a lot of time in this quadrant thinking that we're in the urgent, important quadrant 1. And we do it because we want to help out, we get a sense of satisfaction from completing something urgent quickly. But these tasks are urgent to others, but they aren't important to us. They're not bad, and actually sometimes they can have a little bit of a shift over into quadrant 2. They can be about relationship building, doing people favours, working with others, but they need to be balanced with the tasks that are in our own quadrant 2. What is important but not urgent. Otherwise, we won't be able to make progress in our own goals, and we may end up feeling a sort of personal frustration or resentment. And finally, quadrant 4, not urgent and not important, otherwise known as faffing or procrastination. These things don't help us meet our goals, and primarily they're distractions. So it might be watching rubbish TV, scrolling Instagram, YouTube rabbit holes, some meetings. We spend a lot of time on our phones, and sometimes we have that realization, I've just spent 2 hours on that. I'm never going to get that time back. So they can often end up, if we spend too much time in this quadrant because we're stressed about the other quadrants, we escape here for relief. But this can ultimately make the situation worse, as time would be better spent forward planning in the quadrant 2, or dealing with the tasks in quadrant 1, so that we're able to give ourselves that time to focus in future. But we do need a bit of a break sometimes, and we can't always aim to entirely rid ourselves of these not urgent and not important tasks. And instead, we can think about spending perhaps a limited time on them. So another name for those tasks in quadrant 4, those tasks that are not urgent and not important, are time thieves. Do you, like me, like many of us, feel that lack of time is a serious problem for you? Do you feel that sort of time is slipping through your fingers and leaving you with too little time to accomplish everything that you want? These time thieves are also known as distractions that can rob us of our time, such as emails, talkative housemate, lengthy phone calls, or just slow equipment. And these sort of interruptions and distractions, as we've seen from Eisenhower's matrix, can take our attention away from that creative, strategic work that helps us to move towards our goals. So I want you to have a think now, looking through your schedule, what do you think the biggest time thieves are for you? And if you can think about minimizing these, you can really improve your schedule in quite a remarkable way. So I'm going to share a few examples of common time thieves with you today. So the first one I've got is doom scrolling, whether it's Instagram, YouTube videos, getting stuck in those rabbit holes, Twitter, whatever it is. We might go on to check one thing, respond to one message, watch one video, and then we find it's been 2 hours and we're still there. You absolutely would not be alone if this is something you find yourself doing. But instead, can you think about perhaps limiting the time you spend in these areas, whether it's setting it out at a particular time of day, maybe using it, watch one video as a reward for achieving another task, or there's apps and things on our phone that we can use to set specific time limits for different apps to help us to limit the time thieves that crop up in this area. Another one is slow equipment, whether that's dodgy Wi-Fi or an old laptop or phone. And sometimes this is unavoidable, particularly if you're sharing a house and you've got lots of people trying to work or use the Wi-Fi at the same time. But how about thinking of those times when you really need to prioritize a good connection or working equipment? If you've got a video interview, for example, can you disconnect all other devices and perhaps ask if your housemates can stay off Netflix for the couple of, an hour or so while you're in that kind of really focused zone, and you really need the Wi-Fi to be as strong as possible. Or similarly, if you need a good video or audio, or you need a sort of slightly faster machine in terms of processing time for something in particular, can you think about borrowing that from the university, using university or library resources if that's really required, so that your own equipment doesn't have to be a time thief in terms of getting things done to the best of your ability. And finally, procrastination. This could be more of that doom scrolling. It could be checking online news, cleaning the house, chatty housemates, naps, constant tea and water breaks. It is worthwhile spending time running through our routine to see which of these, or it could be something else, are robbing you of your precious hours. It can really make a big difference to your productivity. And when it comes to thinking of solutions to these time thieves, I want to introduce you to this circle of concern and the circle of influence. So on the left there, we have the circle of concern. This is all of the things that, are of concern to us, but are outside our control. So this might be the weather, politics, the economy, other people's opinions of us. But on the other side, we have the circle of influence. So these are the things that we can control. So it might be your own attitude, your skills, what you read, how you spend your free time, who you spend it with. And when it comes to the relationship between these two circles, it's about whether you are reactive or proactive. Those that are reactive tend to spend a lot of time complaining about those things that are out of their control. Their environment and the forces outside affect their performance and their mood a lot. And additionally, they spend too much time thinking about this and talking about this, that they don't act on the things that they can control. Proactive people, on the other hand, realise that their decisions determine their life, not their conditions. So proactive people don't complain about the things they can't control, and instead they take action to improve the things they can. They understand that they may not have complete control, but they can control how they respond to certain situations. For example, if you get bad results on a particular essay, a reactive person might complain about their teacher, blame the course, and give up. Think, there's no point trying next time because I can't do it. It's not going to work. The teacher is useless. But a proactive person instead says, right, this teacher might not be great, but what can I do to improve? So they might spend some extra study time themselves. They might speak to peers who have different teachers. They might go to talk to a tutor elsewhere that they trust and that they think might be able to help them in this area. They might go to study skills sessions and really take actions about the things they can influence rather than dwelling on the things that they can't. So to take control of those time thieves is all about adopting a proactive focus, a shift from my working as shaping me to I'm taking ownership of shaping my work. So I want you, after this video, to think about some of those time thieves and to consider whether they are things that you can influence and take control of, or whether you need to park them. Perhaps it's not something you can do yourself, but you can ask somebody else for help in order to move something over from the circle of concern closer into that circle of influence. Because if your shovel isn't big enough, get some friends to help. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. When we start our careers, we often get recognised for working longer, faster, harder than our peers, and it can feel like a bit of a competition at university as well. However, as we move upwards, tasks get more complicated. And this is where we need to shift our mindset away from how can I get this done to how can this be done. It's not all about me. We need to realise that we do need to collaborate with others and work with others rather than compete against them. Displaying that kind of win-lose attitude doesn't really add value to the organisation or to your own goals and tasks. Instead, we can appreciate the value that other people bring. They have different perspectives and experiences and opinions, and so together we'll be able to create something much greater than ourselves. So this doesn't just go for time management. It's about the efficiency, but also the effectiveness. How much quality we can bring to a project if we do work together and do work with others. But for the final 10 minutes or so of this video, I wanted to share with you some of my key time management tips. So starting with planning. May sound obvious, but have you heard the phrase break down the boulder or eat an elephant one bite at a time? Essentially, it's all about breaking down a large task into smaller, more manageable chunks, like climbing a mountain, sort of one step at a time. All goals and projects are made up of smaller parts that need to be accomplished in order to achieve a goal or complete that project. But when we are faced with a big goal or a project, it can feel really overwhelming, like trying to eat an elephant whole. It's big and it's tough and it feels impossible. So we need to plan. And to get that plan in place, we need to break things down into milestones and tasks and work backwards from the end date. And why is this beneficial? It really helps us to identify what needs to be completed by when. And that's why we want to consider that end deadline when we are creating those milestones and those smaller tasks that we're breaking down. If we're working in a team, we want to make sure that everybody knows and agrees to those timings, so we're not let down by that lack of communication. And finally, as we've spoken about, if we are working together, it's about celebrating successes together. We'll feel the failures, feel the difficulties acutely, but how can we plan to avoid them? How can we plan to change things next time and really be able to celebrate that success? So that is my tip number 1. Number 2 is all about prioritization. If you don't have a plan, instead of focusing on what needs to be done, we can sort of wander aimlessly, taking care of more trivial matters or something that's easier to achieve. A good tool to help you decide what should be done and what you should be spending your time on is Eisenhower's urgent important matrix. So we do need to think about what is important and what is urgent, because often they aren't the same thing. Remember that urgent tasks require our immediate attention, but they put us in a reactive mode, and they can give us a sort of negative and narrowly focused mindset. Whereas the tasks that are important contribute to our long-term goals, and they're the tasks that help us to operate in a responsive mode, remain calm, rational, and open to working towards new opportunities. So using the matrix, we can break this cycle of firefighting or sort of the urgency addiction and help us to focus on activities that will help us to achieve our goals. Next up, tip number 3 is about starting with the most important tasks. So we've already said that for us to effectively prioritise, we must be able to recognise what is and what isn't important. And that does come back to knowing what our goals are. But if you find yourself having lots of activities in the urgent and important box, it's worth asking yourself, are they really both urgent and important? When a new task comes in, you might want to think about reviewing it against the other activities. Where does this sit amongst them in terms of priority? What needs to be done first and why? What's the consequence of it not happening right now? Can it be delayed until there's more time? Do I need to do it, or can somebody else help? If you need, you can align your tasks with other tasks so that they all fit in. Or can you stop or delay something else instead? And if you start with those most important chunky tasks, then the other things you'll find can usually fit in around them. So it's really important to take some time to identify what is important, and how you can, linking back to the previous point, how you can then prioritize them so that everything else can fit into place. Next up, the penultimate tip, time blocking. It's been proven to be a hugely effective way to focus and get things done. And I use this one all the time in my calendar. I'll block out time to focus on key activities. If I've got a particular project to work on, I will put a set period of time where I know and other people know that I'm going to be switching off from anything else, focusing on that activity to get it done in the time allowed. So it might be that during that time you switch off your phone, you switch off notifications, you don't answer your emails or check social media, and you know that you're working on a specific project in that moment. Or it might be that it's a time when, in the workplace, perhaps other people know that they can't book meetings with you during that time because you have something else important to be working on. And you might need to be flexible with this sometimes, but it can be a really helpful method in terms of training yourself to focus and switch off from the distractions and those time thieves. And my final tip for you today, a nice simple one. Eat your frogs for breakfast. What does this mean? It's about doing the tasks that you really don't want to do at the start of the day, getting them out of the way rather than having them hanging over you all day. So, for example, when I'm making job offers and I'm working on a recruitment process, I might phone the candidates who haven't been successful before I allow myself to do the nice job of making the job offers. So when you've got your list of activities that you need to complete in a day, what are the ones you can get out of the way so that you can focus on the things that you enjoy later on? So to wrap up this video, I want to talk to you about British cycling. Now, it will become apparent why this is relevant in a moment, but in 110 years, no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France, the biggest sort of international long distance cycling competition. Since 1908, only one gold medal had been won in the Olympics by a British cyclist. So the team at the time looked at every detail of what they did, the weight of the bicycle, the diet of the cyclist, but everybody was doing that. They also installed sort of hand sanitizer for everybody who came into contact with the team. They delivered bespoke mattresses and pillows to the hotels for each rider so that they were having a better night's sleep than their competitors across the wall. They hired medical professionals to teach them how to effectively wash their hands to avoid bacterial transfer. And they painted the inside of the vans white so that dust would more easily show up, which could impact the fine mechanics of the bikes. So, under David Brailsford, who implemented these measures, in the 10-year period between 2007 and 2017, British cyclists won 178 World Championships, 66 Olympic or Paralympic gold medals, plus 5 Tour de France victories. So this success came down to David Brailsford's mantra, which was that a 1% increase in success of everything means a huge increase in aggregated success. So by thinking about all these things, the pillows, the mattresses, hand sanitizer, bikes, different bike seats, heated shorts, the result was a huge, one of the most successful runs in cycling history. So why am I talking about British cycling to you here today at the end of this video on personal effectiveness and time management? My message to you is that we've talked about lots of different tips and tricks in today's video. You may not be able to perfectly implement every single one of them, but small successes in a few different areas, picking what's right for you, what's right for your personality, and your personal preferences in terms of time management. 1% increase in a few different areas over time will mean a huge difference in your effectiveness, in your efficiency, and your ability to manage your time and complete and reach your goals. So thank you so much for watching this video today. I really hope that you've been able to take one or two useful things away to help you as you think about your own personal effectiveness and time management in future. So best of luck and goodbye.